You have worked in operations and marketing and recruiting. What's a kind of one through line that you've seen that kind of ties it all together in the ABA space? And kind of a theme that you've observed?
Honestly, it's probably the science of ABA itself. So I started in the clinical side back in 2005, working directly with individuals that mostly had profoundly impacted by autism. And so my whole history throughout all of it has always been grounded in data, reflection, looking at the behavior, trying to, work, change around environments and test things out. So if you look at that, the principles of ABA really lend itself really nicely to operations, to marketing, and to recruiting. Really defining those behaviors, setting clear expectations, and then reinforcing, what I want to see, and then testing and changing as we go. So really, it's been the science that's been the thread throughout the entire thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that makes perfect sense. Switching topics a little bit, the ABA Cares Staffing Summit has really gotten a lot of traction in recent years. What was one or two of the major gaps that you saw in the market that made you think, wow, we really need to put this together, and what made you launch it?
It's a great question. Kind of multi-layered answer, but I would say the number one thing is, ABA is a business of people and people helping people. And if there are no people helping people, there's no services. And so I really launched the summit because that is really the biggest challenge from of obstacles in getting autism care and receiving consistent care. The biggest reason I would say companies are struggling to stay open is having the right staff. In terms of parents being able to get great quality care is getting the right staff that are trained. And so it really all comes back to wanting to bring people together to start talking about the real challenge in the elephant in the room, so to speak. We see it, but how are we going to start bringing in thoughtful, intentional solutions to the community and make real change? That's really what drove the entire AB Care Summit idea. Yeah, and it's been exciting. Like you said, a lot of great reaction. So, well, they're reinforcing it, so we'll keep going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's good. It makes complete sense. And I definitely think there's not enough people to do the helping of people, right? We need more, and I think that's a universal truth across ABA. So you've spoken openly about being neurodivergent in leadership specifically, which I am as well. So I love that message that you have. Tell me about how that helps you, or how that has shaped how you look at building systems and processes.
Yeah. Also, great question. I think my neurodivergent, autism lends itself to really knowing that there's no standard
Mm,
and trying to reverse engineer things. And so looking at things from different angles, making sure that when, we are leading or we are building processes that are for individuals that we are leading, that there's clarity, that there's accountability, and they're not second, thoughts, right? Like they're not nice to haves, I guess. They're critical. And so being able to experience what it's like to need to see things from different angles, extreme clarity process, and then also being able to go back and be flexible and take feedback and change things. And so I think because, I want to make sure that I am looking at it from all different angles that allows for there to be many different forms of how I'm doing something. So if you think about, marketing, you might change it up a little bit from, Instagram to LinkedIn, your messaging. Same thing applies with leadership. It's like I need to know the audience to be able to change it. And I think that with autism too, because, masking and feeling emotions from other people hit me pretty strong. I can, sense that there's something and be able to draw out a communication and can pinpoint what's missing in order to help change the environment for the person. So I would say that's been the biggest impact from my point of view.
yeah, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. Burnout and attrition and turnover are constant challenges in the ABA space. Where do you think that most organizations are really missing the mark in their people operations and maintaining their talent and helping them not burn out?
It's hard. I think that it comes down to support connection and intention, being a thought partner to your employees. Sometimes they can't identify or pinpoint what it is that's causing the burnout. And so spending the time to really help. So I think too many organizations skip the part where there is that human connection, where they're making sure to identify, how can I help this staff member feel valued and feel like they're making an impact? Because I think that's where kind of, if you can picture a thread starting to unravel for people, is when they start to feel like they're not making an impact or they're not valuable, then they get into their head a lot. They start overworking. They start, a lot of different decisions are made. But if you take the time to actually stop and connect with people, then you can figure out how to again create an environment that's going to be conducive for the person and help them figure out how to manage individually for them their time, whatever it is that needs to change in order for them to not feel the burnout or not even get to that fatigue. So I think having real systems, doing real listening, being a real human with other real humans, and just putting yourself in the shoes of your staff. I don't know, that was one thing, but to bundle it all together, that's what I would say.
It makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. And yeah, I think support needs to be individualized, and you need to be able to have that flexibility, which is just not, it's not easy, and it's not present in a lot of organizations. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So what's one thing that you wish more leaders understood about recruiting specifically in this space?
It's hard. And so I think that, I will first talk about something that I see happening in the space and then kind of bring it back. So I think that hiring and retention, they're investments, they're not a box to check. There's some philosophies out there that are, if you can hire faster than they're leaving, thumbs up, we're doing a great job. And that's just doesn't cut it, especially when you're thinking about, providing services to a vulnerable population. You're already hiring, thinking and being okay with turnover, and that's just not the case. It leads to client loss. It leads to compliance risk. Long term, you're putting a band-aid on something and not actually solving, the actual problem and creating more damage. So I think every rushed hire that you make, any, onboarding experience that you're cutting corners, you need to really think about your brand, your reputation, and the impact that you're making is larger than what you think. There's a whole iceberg, especially in a small community like ABA. Reputation, branding is everything. And so when you think about that and who you're going to try to attract in the future, you're making it so much harder for your next recruiter that's potentially your next service that's going to come in, because trying to hire for a brand that doesn't have that great, reputation for training or supporting, you're going to have a hard road back. And so I really would encourage people. The one thing is just to think about your long term and not that short term churn, and being okay with it. Don't accept that this is just the standard. It's really not. There's companies doing really great things out there. And so be one of them, take the time to do that.
That's awesome. Up your standards.
Yeah, up your standards.
It makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. It's what we tell our clients a lot of the time too for marketing. Yes, a lot of them do rip you off and lie. You need to up your standards. You need to start working with someone who tells you the truth. It makes complete sense. So I know this happens to you actually a lot. If a startup ABA group called you tomorrow, what is the first system that you build for them? Where's the first place that you start when it comes to recruiting?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is to evaluate what's already there and pinpoint what the problem is. But by and large, it tends to be the same one. And that is that recruiting is often put in a silo and it's not linked with other departments with clear communication. So in my mind, intake, scheduling, recruiting, they need to be a well-oiled machine that communicate well together, that are able to speak the same language, have the same service level agreements of what the expectations are. Whether you're starting with your first client or looking to scale, the biggest thing is having intentionality again, thinking about the timeline. If you don't have a system to be able to figure out when do we actually need the workforce? What are some, holes in our talent that we need to fill? Again, we think about, building a culture fit, but you really also want a culture add. What is it that, a thought maybe that we're missing, a viewpoint. So I would say, putting in the time and the money to invest in a very clear system between those three departments is crucial and something that I would start with if it's not there already.
Absolutely. It makes
Yeah.
complete sense. Makes complete sense.